if Jordan Morgan doesn't become a Pro Bowl guard, longtime draft analyst Mike Renner would be shocked. He joins me on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can get $5, can bet $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Longtime Pro Football Focus draft analyst Mike Renner joins me on the show today, formerly of the Locked On Podcast Network, where he hosted Renner Ranks. He now hosts a new podcast with Kyle Long, not Chris Long, his brother, former Chicago Bear, called Pushing the Pile on CBS Sports, Monday through Thursday, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Lambeau time. They're out in Florida, so they work off East Coast. But I thought it was the perfect time to bring him on because we're seeing the dividends of this rookie class, and he's launching a new podcast. So, trying to help a Packer fan out around here. Let's get into it with our pal Mike. The podcast is called Pushing the Pile with Kyle Long. I promised myself I would not say Chris Long, but they're both in the NFL media space. Mike Renner, formerly of Pro Football Focus, formerly of the Locked On Podcast Network, now CBS Sports. Mike, awesome to be with you. And could you just tell us a little bit about the new podcast?
Yeah, it's me and Kyle Long, one Packers fan, one Bears fan. Although he did grow up a Packers fan, he admitted to me before. He was a green and gold bleeder. He's a Brett Favre fan. So we have some connection there, but we come at the game from like two different ways. I'm very analytical, very high level, not obviously the locker room sort of perspective that he brings to the table. He's much more of a, feel how much it mattered in terms of like how your body was, all these things that I don't really think about because I wasn't there. He brings that perspective to the table. So it's a nice blend and it's a pretty light show. We try not to take it too seriously.
Well, that's good. Some of the shows out there, they do like let's just have some fun around here. I think
they think they're in the building.
Yeah. So we're gonna have some fun here today, Mike. One question I thought was interesting that I've been hearing asked a lot, and I was just listening, in fact, to Kyle's brother Chris talk to some Packers players about seminal Jordan Love moments. Like, when did you know this was going to be what it ended up being, at least in the second half of the season? We don't know what the rest of his career is going to look like, right? Did you have a moment when you went, okay, I see it. Like, this is it.
So I wrote actually an article, I think it was after week 4 of last year, and no one was really saying, that it was, Jordan Love was for sure going to be the guy at that point. But I went back and, watched every tape, every snap, and I was like, this is going to be high level quarterback play. Like it just is. Like the things that you need to have to play quarterback at an elite level were really all there. And I thought I put a lot more of the blame the first half of the season on the receiving core.
Yeah.
Like there were just a lot of opportunities and a lot of missed sort of connections that, just from my opinion, it's like a high level, having watched like this for the past decade plus, I thought where the wide receivers fall, or the receiving cores fall, and not Jordan Love. So like I was halfway through the season being like, he's the guy. I'm actually more worried about these wide receivers and if they're going to come up to speed than I am about Jordan Love being the franchise quarterback. And so I guess it was pretty early on then. And when I really saw, though, that it was this receiving core, gosh, what game was it? It was one of the games where Jaden Reed really went off. And I didn't have a super high grade on Jaden Reed coming out, but I was like, this guy knows. He's got a nose for playmaking. He's got that ability to see when he's got the ball in his hands, how to get upfield, where to go. Like things that just you can't coach to a wide receiver. And I was like, okay, hand up, I was dead wrong about Jaden Reed. Hand up, I was dead wrong about Dontavion Wicks. These guys can play. So it was, I think, later on in the season where I was like, okay, this wide receiving core, I'm buying into. Now, I'm still maybe not as high as everyone else is. I still think they're more of a wide receiver by committee. Yeah. But I think when you have that many guys, when you have 4 guys across that can all win on their own, maybe not necessarily at an elite level, but all 4 guys are capable of doing it if they get that mismatch, that's more than good enough, because then you can find that mismatch in pretty much every secondary in the NFL.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this because right now the Packers, they last year they had, even with all of those, mistakes that they had early in the season, the inconsistencies of the offensive line and Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur trying to get a handle on what can we call, like on 3rd and 6, what can we call? They're calling RPOs and there's not a receiver running a route. And it's just like, how, this is the NFL. How can that happen? But we've never really seen an offense consistently be really, really good without a receiver, at least in the modern version of the NFL, who's also someone we think of as one of the best receivers in the league. Is this something where you think they can sustain this, assuming they can continue to cycle through receivers, or are they going to need one of these guys, you think, to step forward just from like a consistency standpoint?
I do think they need someone to be more consistent catching the football, shall we say. Like they need not just someone, they need like all those guys. It's unfortunately, like last year, if you just take it on a whole, they still had so many guys, whether it was Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, at times where it's just like, man, they should have come down with more passes than they did, unfortunately. Like you just expect wide receivers. So I think that's the one thing. But I think if they all get more consistent in that regard, if you don't see the drops, you don't see the misplays, the catch point that you saw last year, I think you can get by with kind of, what Tom Brady did for a big portion of his career, which is, they end up putting up high end numbers in times, but I don't think you'd ever call them high end. Wes Welker wasn't, an elite guy. Julian Edelman, not necessarily an elite guy, but those guys put up high end numbers in that offense. So I think it's very possible that they don't need one. Now, selfishly, I'd love one. Everyone would want one, but I definitely don't think to run what they want to do offensively. And especially, we haven't even discussed the tight ends, or haven't even mentioned them, especially when you've put those 2 guys into the fold. Yeah, I just think when every is a dude out there, every single guy is capable. There's no one who's out of the progression, shall we say. That's a way you can still run a high-end offense in the NFL.
I think it's easier now than it's ever been to do it this way, and it's going to require at least these guys playing well in their rookie deals. The Patriots still had Rob Gronkowski, and I know he wasn't always there, but that matters too. I was trying to think like, Drew Brees, Marcus Colston, but like they had Jimmy Graham for those for a lot of those teams too. So this is hard. What they're trying to do is pretty unprecedented. But look, it was pretty unprecedented last year with these young players. I mentioned this the other day on the show. Even if none of these guys take a step forward, this was a really good offense last year. Who do you think, if they do take a step forward, let's set Jordan Love aside because the quarterback just impacts the game too much. If this person takes a step forward, that will push the offense forward in the most meaningful way.
I mean, I think it's quite easily Christian Watson. Yeah. Now, will he, will his hamstrings allow him to?
Yeah, stay healthy.
But that is the guy who's easily the most physically gifted, that if you have that guy humming, if he really is a problem in that intermediate deep range consistently, everything opens up, right? That's that guy that can make everyone else's life easier because, for as much as I think Wicks and Reed are super talented players, I don't think they are vertical threats in the traditional sense of like, we have to worry about them going down the football field. They're not taking attention. And just like why offense coordinators covet speed, it's because those guys have to command attention, because if you forget about them, all of a sudden they're gone. So that's why that guy taking the step forward makes everybody else's life easier. Now, from what I saw last year, especially I think him being out down the stretch was almost part of the reason why they did excel the way they did at the end, because you had 3 guys that were more reliable in their route running capabilities than Christian Watson has been over the course of his career, unfortunately. So I hope he turns that around. I hope he takes that next step. But again, I'm not waiting on bated breath from what I saw a year ago.
More to come in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Better BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day, or maybe you're like me and in the mornings you like to have some time to yourself where you know you can just have your coffee and read for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables are more important than ever. Therapy could be one of your non-negotiables, or therapy can help you find your non-negotiables. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank you for making Locked On Packers your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Football. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Yeah, we'll see. He's got to prove it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But if he does, like, look, there is crazy high-end potential there. And we saw the flashes of some route running, even just as simple as win on a slant in the red zone. Like, those kinds of things can be such a big difference maker for this team. Defensively, for the last year, I've been talking about how much a cultural shift is just as important as a schematic shift. And I think that we're going to put that to the test this year in Green Bay. How much do you think for any team, not just the Packers, but for any team, this sort of like, hey, philosophically, we want to do something different. We want to be an attacking defense. We want to change our mindset a little bit here. How much do you think that can impact the team?
I think it could be huge because of who they have, right? They did not have the personnel necessarily to do what they wanted to do under Joe Barry, right? Like, and it's just kind of a mindset where, and I think that was especially impactful for guys like Jair Alexander, where telling that guy to play off coverage, 50 snaps a game, it's just like, it probably weared on him. He just probably was getting frustrated back there. That's probably why he went out to be a captain that one time.
No doubt.
It's like, I think you have the personnel to really, and especially up front in this defensive line, to start creating some havoc too. So yeah, I think the mindset shift is huge. But then I also think you brought in some players, especially in that safety room, that fit that mindset shift. Like, those are physical tone-setting safeties in Javon Bullard and Xavier McKinney. So I do think you'll see a much, much improved defense this year, even if the personnel isn't like this drastic turnover. I think you'll get the most out of them this year.
What do you think of Javon Bullard? Because he's someone who, it seems like right now, day one starter, no question about it, is going to be the guy next to Xavier McKinney. He was someone that I thought was better in the slot at Georgia. I thought he was a better nickel corner than he was as a safety, but they're going to use him, it seems like, all over. What did you think of him as a prospect, and what does he bring to this defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think from this preseason already, I'm not sure I've seen a safety. I can't remember a Packer safety that takes on blocks quite the way he does, right? Like, he is two-gapping tight ends in the run game. He's blowing up wide screens and just like sending wide receivers backwards. So it's something that is just a tone shift, right? It's just a skill set that really, when you don't have that guy, you allow a lot of kind of easier yards kind of on the outside, especially in the running game, that just, he's going to shut those down now. So I was a big fan of his. I believe I ended up with him as my safety one in the draft class, the top 50 player. So I was a big fan. And I do think that when they got him, that was probably, my favorite value pick of the Packers in that draft.
So one pick that did not get made to much adulation was Evan Williams, a guy who has been a training camp standout. And in fact, going back to spring ball, has been a standout. We had Jim Nagy on the show at the Senior Bowl, and he said, look, this was someone who we were talking to NFL teams, and they were saying 4th round, we feel like that's where he was going to go. The consensus boards had him much lower, which to me could just signal he was under-scouted, under-evaluated nationally. What did you think of him? Because I know you do the work. What did you think of him and watching him?
Yeah, my take was limited player. And anytime you put limitations on a guy, that's how you drop to day 3. Obviously productive player, But I was like, if he's not a box safety, I'm not sure I trust him to play deep consistently. I think he could get exposed in space. I don't think he's a great coverage player. But I think if you play him in the box, he can be a really talented player, a great tackler, just kind of athletic limitations. But the guy, again, fits what we've been talking about in terms of this tone setting. He plays the game with an edge. He plays the game the correct way. And it was a guy I thought like you would love to have, even if it's just for a special teamer, which obviously the Packers could desperately use. So
yeah,
I was a fan. Like people were kind of like, huh, to that pick. But to me, there were far more questionable picks in the Packers. And after seeing the rest of their draft, I was like, that one I can get on board with. I think that guy actually has a role to carve out in like dime nickel defenses.
It seems like they're gonna play some 3 safety looks in this defense. Matt LaFleur did not rule out that being their sort of, I don't like to use the word base because it makes people think of like 3 linebackers on the field, that kind of base, but their most used personnel packaging could be a 3 safety look if they think that's their best 11. But they're still going to have to put some linebackers on the field. And that's a big question mark with this team right now. It seems like there is a pretty big gap between how people felt about Edgerrin Cooper and how people felt about Tyron Hopper, despite the fact that they were drafted only a round apart. What did you think of those guys as prospects?
Yeah, I was right there in that gap. I think I had Cooper as linebacker 3, but he was behind Junior Colson, who the Packers were never going to draft, just not scheme fit, and behind Peyton Wilson, who, with the injury history, I knew he was just not going to go to where I had evaluated him. So in terms of people that the Packers legitimately could draft, he was the best linebacker on the board, in my opinion. A guy who crazy athleticism, crazy ability to cover ground, and make plays going forward that they just don't have. Like it's complete night and day from a guy like Quay Walker, who's very much a sit back, let the play come to him, try to finish it there sort of linebacker. Edgerrin Cooper is going to attack. He's going to get downfield. He may be wrong sometimes, but he'll make more.
He's fast enough to recover. That's the crazy part. He can be wrong and still be right.
Exactly. And then Hopper, I was like, he was just a loaded gun whose aim was wild as can be. He pointed it wherever. Yeah. So that was how I felt watching his game. And then the
Dick Cheney of linebackers.
There, exactly. I was trying to be kind of coy about it, but that's a much better analogy. But then he goes to I think it was his pro day where he did full testing, and it was legitimately not good. And so that's when I was like, okay, so his tape, the only thing to really like is he's kind of explosive, twitchy guy, but he didn't test out like one. So what is he really now? Maybe he tried to put on weight for the NFL, whatever. A lot of undersized linebackers do that, and they're actually a little bit more explosive. But that's still not a good thing, right? If he's not his listed weight. So yeah, with Tyron Hopper, the thought process to me when I saw the pick, I was like, they just drafted a special teamer in the 3rd round, and I was like, that's top 100 picks are not special team picks. You got a lot of day 3 ones to save for that.
Yeah, and then I thought he went out and played some decent football against the Broncos. Certainly, you're going to feel the tackles when he makes a tackle. You are going to feel him. He's going to bring the thunder and the shoulder pads. On that one, we can't get away from the 1st round pick, Jordan Morgan, who was someone that I believe you and I talked about before the draft. He was widely seen as a guard. The Packers, I won't say pretended, but I believe pretended that he was ever going to play tackle for them. I don't think he was ever really going to play tackle for them. He was someone that I know the Pro Football Focus grades really, really liked. But there was an idea that he was going to have to move to guard. What did you think of Jordan?
Yeah, I saw him as a guard, but I didn't see that as a bad thing whatsoever. I think you look at how much guards are getting paid. You just saw Robert Hunt get $100 million, and you see.
You said you thought he could be a Pro Bowl guard. I think.
I didn't say that. Right? I said I would be floored if he's not. I said I'll take any bet I can find because I loved him. I had him as my 20th overall player. I thought he was the best guard in this draft class, bar none. I think the transition shouldn't be too difficult for him, just from what I saw on tape. In terms of his coordination, in terms of his, hand coordination, feet coordination, he was always in sync on tape. And now I thought his problems at tackle were with how he was able to manipulate space because he is a bigger dude. He moves well, but he is still and it's more in his lower half, right? It's like when you have those thick of legs, it's just going to be difficult to really play tackle consistently and have the foot speed and foot quickness to do so. But I thought once you move him to guard, because his best reps were in a phone booth, and when he could get on guys and like deuce blocks there at tackle real quickly off the snap, I thought that's when you really saw his talent take over. And the guy's built, 11-inch hands, the broadness you see of his lower half, his upper half, like he is built in the lab to play guard. So, obviously left tackle to right guard's a big flip. I probably expect some growing pains, but I think by end of this season, year 2, you'll see high quality guard play from this guy. I'll just be really surprised if he's not.
We'll close it out with Mike Renner in just a second here on Locked On Packers. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for that role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your job faster and for free. That's because LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. Now go listen to the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insights on the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. You can find the link to Locked On Fantasy Football in the description, so you don't even need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. He plays 4 positions starting in the spring. Like it's pretty crazy that they were just like, we'll try you everywhere. And it wasn't because they couldn't find a home for him. It was, let's just try it. Let's see what it looks like. You don't usually see rookie offensive linemen get that sort of treatment in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to kind of what I said about, I just thought he would be versatile based off of how well he moved. Like some guys kind of have built-in patterns to their position that you worry about them translating, patterns of movement that you're like, maybe he has to stick there. With him, when you saw him, he has that kind of flexibility. So very glad he settled in the right guard, because I do think once you get that interior for a guy like Jordan Love, that's really all you need. Now, not to say you don't need tackles. Tackles obviously help a lot, but you can help out a guy like Rasheed Walker. You can help out a guy like Zach Tom, not that you necessarily need to. But if you give Jordan Love that interior step up into, he's fantastic at doing that. So if you get that firm interior, and I think that was probably the Packers' sort of train of thought on this pick, was give him that firm interior. We'll get the pressure mitigated on the outside, and then we'll always be able to run a capable offense.
The hope is that the run blocking is going to be a little bit better. What do you think of the swap, Aaron Jones for Josh Jacobs in here, and understanding Jordan Morgan on the interior is going to play a big role in that too, because he did not have many lanes to run through last year in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I do think the Packers will miss healthy Aaron Jones. I don't think there's a lot of running backs in the NFL that I would take over him for what the Packers did offensively. Truly, like, he was special in that scheme. His ability to hit holes at full speed with no fear. I mean, it was unique. So I do think you'll miss a little bit of that explosiveness in this offense. But I do think what you miss with Aaron Jones, that explosiveness, you'll make up for in the fact that Josh Jacobs isn't going to have to come off the field nearly as much. He's not going to get hurt nearly as much just with his body type, and obviously what we've seen with Aaron Jones. Knock on wood on that one. But he can kind of do his role and also the A.J. Dillon role. So much more of a 3-down back, but then you have Marshawn Lloyd to kind of play the real deal passing downs and give him a breather still. So I think it's probably a bit of a wash on the overall, but you'll definitely miss some in the pure running game going from Jones to Jacobs.
Last thing here, Mike, expectations for Jordan Love. How good do you think he can be?
I mean, elite, right? I think there's probably 3 guys right now I'm for sure taking over him. Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, like that. I wouldn't even really debate that. But I think very much he could get to that next tier. He could get to the Justin Herbert tier. I don't think that's off limits whatsoever. I think he's just much more of a creative quarterback than even like a Justin Herbert is. He's got a lot of tools in his bag, right? So the improvement we've seen from him, I'm not putting that off the table whatsoever.
Well, the show is Pushing the Pile every day, Monday through Thursday, 9:30 Eastern. And you can find it on YouTube, of course, anywhere you get your podcasts. Follow Mike on Twitter, all the good stuff there. Mike, appreciate the time, man.
For sure, Peter. Happy to do it.
Thanks to Mike Renner for joining the show. We had joint practices yesterday with the Packers and the Ravens. We will get into some of that stuff, by the way. The Packers seem to look really good, which is good. To the point that Ravens fans were mad because there were only like 3 Ravens reporters there. And so they were all reading the Packers tweets, which were mostly about the Packers and mostly about how good the Packers looked. A little sluggish to start offensively, but defensively, apparently very good all day. And then in the red zone, Jordan Love, four passing attempts, 4 touchdowns, pretty good. Scored on their move the ball periods, 2-minute periods. So a much better joint practice experience for the Packers this time around. I did talk to Kevin Ostreicher on Locked On Sports today, our Locked On Ravens host, about it today. So you can go check that out. But we'll be live tomorrow after the game talking, and we'll pull in some of what we saw in joint practices because Jordan Love's, we don't know if he's going to play in this game, probably not. So that'll be more that we'll get to tomorrow. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, wherever you find the Twitter machines. Locked On Packers. I guess it's only on Twitter. But wherever you find podcasts, Locked On Packers is there. I got ahead of myself a little bit on that one. And on the social medias, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Locked On Packers, we are there so you can stay Locked On Packers.